Good morning, everyone, and welcome at our fourth webinar about remote leadership. As you've just heard, we are recording the webinar, so if you would prefer not to be as a video, you can put yourself on, you can take your video off. But it's good for the people who cannot follow this morning that they can still follow the replay later on. So welcome. We have a great panel of speakers today. I'm very proud of the chain of people that we have here who will represent all a part of the remote leadership that we're currently dealing with. I'm gonna present them later on. I'm very excited about this topic. We spent some time preparing and I got more and more excited every day we had a meeting about it, because this is something that is not only more than relevant currently, but it's also a topic that touches us all. It touches us as an employee, it touches us as a colleague, but it also touches us as an employer, as a director, as a manager. And we have to deal with the current situation. So we do have to change our behavior in this new remote world. I don't know if few of you followed the first few webinars, but we saw already that some of the trends that have been predicted the last few years in HR and recruitment that were future trends. We saw again that the future has caught up on us, and that again COVID has been an accelerator for things that were predicted for a few years from now. Our diverse panel is going to discuss both trends again, two very practical matters, starting with recruitment, with the hiring process, but also the onboarding, the probation periods, to the whole well-being of your entire staff, which is more than ever important. And all this, of course, remotely. I hope that you will be as inspired as I was, because myself, I also come from a situation, of course, where we have always had face-to-face meetings and where you have face-to-face bilas with your colleagues. And I was confronted by Jorn saying that my behavior is not the only way of doing it. And for me, it still seems so impersonal if you're talking to your colleagues via a screen, and I still give the preference to face-to-face meetings, but that's not always possible. So he let me think a lot about my own behavior, about my own way of thinking, and I hope that he will do the same to you. I will launch a few polls that will be before each speaker. It's an anonymous poll, so do not hesitate to answer. We will just see the percentages, but it would be nice if you can all answer, because it will give a better idea of what you're thinking. You can ask your questions via the chat. We will come back to them at the end of the webinar. If there's a lot of questions and we will not have the time to answer them all during the webinar, we will make sure that we come back to you later. So now I would like to introduce our speakers to you in order of speaking. First of all, Nelly Verlinde, who is an HR specialist at Talentsoft. I have to say a digital HR specialist at Talentsoft. And Talentsoft is the European leader in cloud-based talent management and learning software. And then we're going to Casper Hoppe, who is the founder of Hoppe Executive Search. And it's an internationally operating recruitment agency specialized in IT and artificial intelligence. Then we have Bart Aben, and Bart is HR advisor at NavInfo. And NavInfo is one of the global players in the field of self-driving car technology and mapping and navigation data. And then last but certainly not least, Jorn Fokkens. Jorn Fokkens is an HR and change manager at SIA Partners. And SIA Partners is a management consultancy firm existing for more than 20 years in France and over 10 years in the Netherlands. Before I give the floor to Nelly, I'm going to launch the first poll. And normally you would see it now. You can all answer. I still wait for a few answers. Gonna end the poll in 3 seconds. So if you haven't answered yet, please do so. I'm gonna share the results. So now you see the results. So COVID has accelerated certain trends in HR and recruitment, the biggest one being employee well-being. You answered that for 41%. And the second one, 36%, creating a hybrid workplace. So I think this is something that Nelly can deal with. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, as few of you I see cannot see the polls because they're using a web-based. That is possible. I'm sorry for those who cannot see the polls. For the next one, I will read the question for you. You will not be able to answer, but then you know what the poll is like. I'm going to give the floor to Nelly, and I wish you a lot of fun and wisdom during this webinar. Nelly, it's up to you.
Thank you very much, Sylvie, and good morning, everyone. Very excited to be here this morning. I am going to start by sharing my screen. So you should see my screen now, if all goes well. Yes, I see some nodding heads. That's fantastic. First, let me come back to the poll question, which was actually a little bit of a trick question because all 4 of them are things that have been accelerated this year, and we'll be talking about them in this presentation. What's very interesting and what I'm actually very happy about seeing, though, is that most of you chose for the employee well-being, which is one of the things that I believe will be a priority for many organizations as of now, but certainly over the next year too. So we'll get to speak to that in a little bit. All right, then clarity in chaos. Well, I think it comes as no surprise to you that this year has been quite chaotic. But amidst all that chaos, there's a little bit of good news too, because we were able to identify a few trends, so to speak, for the next year, things that we believe will certainly be very important themes for HR. Hence the theme, clarity in chaos. I've been lucky enough to talk about HR trends for the past years, and what we believed for a long time was that the biggest change was going to come from the 4th industrial revolution, in which we find ourselves right now. The fact that there's a massive wave of automation, there's a lot of technology, and so HR trends were for a long time linked to that, and also that was a driver of changes that we saw. We were in this world that was often characterized as a VUCA world, with VUCA standing for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. However, this year has made it super clear that change can also come from an unexpected direction, and in this case, a global pandemic. Now, that made us think about this whole VUCA concept, and we decided to let's say, reinvent the VUCA concept, or at least redefine it. And so massive innovation, we added an H to the word VUCA, as you can see, and VUCA became VUCA with an H, with the V standing for virtuality, the H for humility, the C for connection, and the A for authenticity. Now, these are also the 4 big themes that we have identified for 2021 and beyond, starting with the first one, which is virtuality. Now, I think when you see the word virtuality, you immediately have all kinds of things that come to mind. The biggest one perhaps being that we do things online and that we use digital tools for that. Now, when COVID-19 hits the world this year, many organizations, they had to go remote pretty much overnight often. And so a lot of people, they found themselves working from home. Their days were being filled with one video call after the other. And at first, what we tried to do was we tried to fit in what we were doing before, but we tried to do that online. And I think this is quite a funny image actually, because here you see a Zoom call or a Teams call with so many people fit in one call, which obviously is something that doesn't really work. And something else that I think we found out quite quickly is that there are so much things that you notice when you see people face to face in terms of their body language, you sense things, all these things, all of a sudden they got lost because it's much harder to do that when you're talking to people over a video. So what does that mean if we look from an HR perspective? This means that we have to start rethinking pretty much all of our HR practices. One example is onboarding, and this is something that Bart will talk about later this morning. Because how do you go about onboarding when it's remote? But it's the same thing for recruitment, and it's also the same thing for people management, because managers this year, at least a lot of them, they found a lot of their people working from home, so there was no longer the direct contact. So how do you then go about managing your people? And if we look a little bit further than that, it means that organizations, they will now have to start rethinking how they will deal with their employee experience, because this employee experience will become more and more a virtual employee experience. Because it's not that this situation is going to be drastically changing once COVID has subsided. A lot of organizations have already announced that they will go to a hybrid setup once the pandemic is over, where people will actually be working more from home than they used to. So no matter how you look at it, we will have to rethink a lot of our HR practices. Now, the second big theme, and this is one of my personal favorites, that we identified for next year is humility. And this is a rather new concept in the workplace, because we're not used to being humble at work. We're not used to say, I don't know in the workplace, because we've been taught at work that we need to impress people, that we need to always have an answer. So, but this year has taught us that actually we do not always have the answer, and that, we just don't know, and we don't know what's next. We found ourselves facing challenges that we have not necessarily thought about before. So it is going to be important that we change this attitude, and that we are actually allowed to say we don't know. However, and I think this is very important to note here, saying you don't know or not knowing is not the same as not trying. So what this implies is that we will need to try new things. And trying new things also means learning new things. And that brings me to another element that's very important in this regard, and also important for HR. It is that it needs to be okay for people to make mistakes in an organization. And that's also something that in many companies we're not used to. We're not used to for it to be okay to make mistakes. So this is very important, to create an environment in which that is okay. I was on a panel a few weeks ago with a very inspiring lady, and she said, we should actually change the way we think about mistakes. We need to think about them as learning moments. She said, and actually you should share all these experiences within the company, and you should think about them as, okay, what did we try? What happened? And what did we learn from that? Because in a way, if you think about it, a mistake is indeed, they always say you need to learn from your mistakes. So in a way, making a mistake is indeed a learning moment. And this then is also related to learning new skills. Now, upskilling the workforce has been a theme for a while now. We know that a big part of the global workforce will need to learn new skills, hard skills, but certainly also soft skills. So this is becoming very important. And that is also linked to humility, because once you say, I don't know something, you say at the same time that you need to learn something. And when you learn new things, you need to be allowed to make mistakes. So that's the second big theme for 2021 and beyond. And what I really like about these 4 themes is that they're all connected with each other, and that one is sort of a result from the other. Because what happens if within the company, people are not afraid to say that they don't know, they're not afraid to make mistakes, it is a really good basis for stronger connections between people. Because nobody is pretending, everybody can be honest with each other, which is a good basis for better collaboration and for better connections. Now, probably you're now wondering, what does Brad Pitt have to do with all of this? I'm not sure if you saw the movie Moneyball. If you haven't, the days are getting shorter, it's cold outside, so you can definitely add it to your list of movies to watch. It's quite an old movie, but it's a very good one. In a nutshell, what happens in Moneyball is Brad Pitt is a sports coach, and in their part of sports, what they do, they select players based on 5 criteria. I believe there are 5 criteria, and always the same criteria. What happens with Brad Pitt's team is that they use an algorithm that selects players with an atypical profile, players that nobody else wants in this case. And what happens is they put all these players together to create a team. And of course, the team is becoming super successful. And what the lesson for HR in this is that there lies a really big power in building teams made of people with diverse backgrounds and also diverse competencies. So, and that is also a very good basis for stronger connections. Coming back to this diversity, research has shown that companies that have a higher diversity, it boosts innovation, because you've got various perspectives, various different perspectives looking at problems from different angles. So you get more creative solutions and you get more innovation within your company. So that's one element of the connection theme. Another one that's important to mention is that if you want to build a better connection as an organization with your people, then that starts with knowing your people. It often happens, for instance, that when vacancies open up within the organization, that organizations immediately start looking outside their organization to fill those vacancies, not knowing that within their own organization, there are people that would be great for a certain vacancy and that would be happy actually to fill it. Now, knowing your people means that you need information about your people as well, especially in larger organizations. You need to have data on how people are performing, on what people's aspirations are, on what their learning needs are, what their learning wishes are. If you have all that information, that's the first step towards getting to know your people better and creating that better connection with them. Now, then the last theme that we identified, and as you'll see, it's also linked to the other 3, is about authenticity. Now, when we talk about authenticity, we have looked at it from 2 angles. The first one is authenticity from an employee perspective. And I think this is something that is definitely a result from all the events last year, is that we've all become more authentic at work. Why? Because many of us found ourselves working from home in our personal environment. We saw our colleagues all of a sudden with children on their laps, or with a bird sitting on their heads. I'm not making this up, by the way, or with dogs running around, or with cats running around. You saw your managers sometimes, with wearing a sweatsuit. So in a way, I think we've been more authentic at work than we were ever before, because there's something about being at home that makes us be more real, I think, than when we were in an official work environment. Now, why is this important? Because pretending to be somebody else takes up a lot of energy, and that energy we need now more than ever to do our job. So that's the first reason. Now you might be wondering, why do you see this weather forecast image here? Because a fun little thing that some companies decide to do in this regard is that before they have a meeting, they ask everybody, okay, what's your personal weather forecast like today? And so someone says, yeah, it's bright and sunny, then you know, okay, that person is in a good mood. And if somebody else says, okay, big thunderstorms, you know, okay, bad mood, and you can actually take that into account. Now, there's a very interesting other element to being authentic at work that I like to highlight here, and that is about personalization. So we see that giving people the possibility to personalize not only the way they work, but also their role, even if it's just a little bit. So, you know, you allow them to craft their job in a way that suits them best. This is something that is becoming more and more important as well. Now, then the other side of being authentic is about being authentic as an organization. Again, there are various elements here. The first one is that this is important for you as an employer, your employer brand, when it comes to candidates. So candidates today, especially from younger generations, they look at what are the values of the organization that they might work for, and do those values align with their own personal values. Then the second element here is about how are you as an employer towards your current employees, and that what you promise them, that you need to keep that promise. Because if you say that you are an employer that offers a lot of flexibility to employees, but in reality you don't, then this is of course not gonna have a good impact on your employees' trust in you as an organization. So it's important that you really live the values that you say you have. Now, what we really see is that more and more organizations, they are becoming what we call purpose-driven organizations. So these are organizations that have their purpose at the core of their business. So their purpose is intertwined with all their decisions, activities, and practices in the organizations. This is something that research also thinks that could be a really good remedy against a drop in people's productivity and motivation due to the fact that a lot of them have been working from home for such a long period this year. And I think that wraps up my 4 big themes in a nutshell for next year. So I think I can now give the mic to the next, to the poll question, I believe.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Nelly. Indeed, before we go to Casper, we have one question, but I think we're going to save that to the end because it would be nice, I think, to keep all the questions together at the end. I'm going to read the poll for those who cannot see it. So I'm going to launch the second poll. And the question is, which type of candidates mostly look for remote working contracts? So if you can start, for those who see the poll, if you can start answering. Mm-hmm. I'm going to wait for another 3 seconds. So if you haven't answered yet and you can see the poll, please do so. I'm going to end the polling. And I'm going to share the results. You see that there is a good balance. So parents with young kids, 29%, candidates with tasks that traditionally require concentration, 33%, and people that don't like to commute, 33%. I guess Casper is going to say something about it, so I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to give the floor to Casper.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Sophie. Thank you, Nelly, for the previous presentation about general HR trends. I hope you can all hear me well. I don't have slides. And just to reintroduce myself. I run a recruitment agency in IT, specifically in AI engineers. And I noticed this very lovely series from the French Chamber of Commerce by SIA Partners and Talentsoft together earlier this summer about a few topics relating to HR. And during the summer, I noticed something happening to recruitment myself. And that's where I contacted Sylvie to see if we could extend the series of the HR talk with a topic about remote working. And what I noticed myself as a recruitment agency is that I got a substantial, remarkable number of candidates contacting me saying, Casper, I am looking for a new job that allows me to do remote working, a remote contract. And when I say substantial, I actually mean that at some point, literally every day, I got contacted by engineers, by IT engineers and AI specialists saying, I want to work remotely. Can you help me finding this opportunity? So that was like 90% almost. So that was more than remarkable. And at the same time, I had a dilemma, not more than 5% of my clients, or basically potential employees, offered that opportunity for an official remote working contract. So what I did, first of all, I asked a bit to these candidates, what do you mean when you say, I want a remote working contract? And that was a good thing that I did that, because I got two different type answers, two very specific, distinct type answers. First of all, there's the people who want to do remote working for what I call a virtual company or a distributed company. So basically, you would work for a company that doesn't have a physical office, or at least not in the country where you work and you live. And you see this happening more and more with modern IT, American, also some European type companies in IT. And of course, this distributed or virtual organization, when it comes to contracts, it has quite a bit of labor law impact and also tax impact. So that was the first group, the virtual company, distributed company for remote working, fully not linked to a physical office. But the second one is more substantial, the group that asked for a contract that structurally allows to do home working. And when you say structurally, you mean at least a couple of days a week. That's where the large number of people said, I'm quite comfortable with this period, where I learn to work from home, to do my work concentrated, to don't disturb tasks. And this is the answer to the poll that you'd seen. You see people saying, if I need to do work from home, I need to be concentrated and I need to focus on a task that don't disturb task. I prefer to do that at home and I can be more productive. So that's the second group of people that asked for a remote contract. So I started asking around, do you see this happening as well? I suddenly have this increase in number of candidates looking for this. And people in HR and with my clients said, yes, we also see this. And we don't only see it with new candidates, we also see the request coming from our current employees. So I thought, I thought, can I see a typical type of candidate or new employee that fits this profile? Now, first of all, this virtual and distributed organization that's very much select. It is linked to a group of people that are basically programmers that completely work behind their laptop all the time, usually between the age of 21 to 30. They have agile meetups, virtual environments. They need powerful laptops, and sometimes they even work in different time zones. And I know a guy in Amsterdam who used to work normal Dutch times, and he shifted to working American times in COVID times. But what type of person requires that second group? That group that says, I need that concentrated, don't disturb me type of activity. That's exactly where people say, I can be more productive at home. I can prepare my situation better. I need to be concentrated. I need to be in a situation where I'm literally not disturbed and I can produce more a couple of days a week working from home. So that about the type of people. So that's the input when it comes to recruitment and the change to remote working. And I come to a conclusion. I see two trends. I see this innovative US and even European style company that is fully virtual or distributed. And that's not a trend, that's here to stay. Those are modern companies that set the trend at the moment. And two, I see a general trend, an overall trend that home working is regarded as attractive for new employees. But remote working is here to stay. And employers that are aware of this and that prepare for this are best set to become winners and to attract talent and resources that they really need.
Thank you, Casper. Thank you very much. It's very interesting because the war on talent has been going on for quite a while. And that means that as an employer, you have to adapt constantly to attract the right employees. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a very good point to see for employers to be future-proof as well, because even though we're in the midst of a crisis, I don't think that the war on talent will be gone. So,
and the demand is high and the number of employees offering this is low, so you can jump in this gap and make sure you're attractive to this talent. Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Casper. I'm going to launch the next poll before we go to Bart. Can I ask everyone to be on mute if you're not on mute, please? So I'm going to read the poll again for those who cannot see it. The poll is, my company has put in place new protocols for onboarding, home office, and management. So for those who can see the poll, please start answering. I'm very curious to read your answers. A few seconds. If you haven't answered yet, please do so before I end the polling. Yeah, I'm going to end the polling. And I'm going to share the results with you. So you see a very large population saying yes in March straight away. And then there's 20% saying no, not yet, but we're working on it. So I think that's a good start for Bart's presentation, because Bart can share with you the more practical side of it, the way he, with his company, has put in place the whole protocols for onboarding and home office and management. So I'm going to stop sharing the results. And I'm going to give the floor to Bart, but not before asking everyone to be on mute, please, so we can hear Bart well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvie. So my contribution today will mainly focus on the protocols, the onboarding that we did in our company, but also following on Casper, what actually happens to those talent that has been searched and selected and is offered to a company. How do we specifically onboard them? So my contribution today is not limited to onboarding alone. It's also focused on performance and specific success factors for future leaders. And lastly, I will give a clear message how we can learn from the past and what future leaders can learn from practical examples from our company. So today, I will talk about the following. We will start to discuss about practicalities such as clear infrastructure and protocols. I'm very glad to see that a lot of people already have those clear protocols in place. For those who have not, stay tuned because I'll talk a little bit more about it. So secondly, we'll talk about onboarding. Again, what will happen to those talent, performance, and what success factors, and how we can learn from the past. So a little bit more about myself. I'm the HR advisor of Nevinfo Europe. Nevinfo Europe is a high-tech company with a lot of expertise. We have experts coming all over the world, over 26 nationalities working here. We work on the most complex codes and algorithms designed to build the future of driving. So basically we work on autonomous driving. So in the beginning, I will talk about ground zero, the protocols. Protocols were very important. Mainly we had to scale up our IT infrastructure, and our IT department did a fantastic job in making sure that everybody has his hardware installed and protected. So we really had to think about, okay, what do we need to do to make sure that our people can work from home? So it was quite a short and intensive process, but within 1.5 weeks, we had tackled all bottlenecks. On the one hand, that was because we already had the infrastructure to work from home. And the second thing was that we only need to scale it up. So it was quite successful in that matter. So because I can imagine that already a lot of companies already have the protocols and same things about the infrastructure, I will talk about the most interesting part of my job, which is onboarding. So if we talk about phase now, which is, we're now in December, so approximately 9 months from ground zero, and the infrastructure is really embedded in our company. So I will specifically focus on onboarding. My contribution is not limited to only new employees. It's also focused on the existing group of employees who are also working from home. So one of the big challenges was to be successful in onboarding during the COVID pandemic. I'm happy to say that all of our new employees are exceeding expectations, and the way we did our onboarding went very well. No isolated feelings were reported, and if there were any, we did try to solve it to give them more attention than normal. So in the beginning, we were a little bit struggling because, yeah, of course, not many people were allowed in the office, especially also new employees first had to go in quarantine. And even after the quarantine period, we were very careful with one-to-one communication, which was usually the way of onboarding. We assign a buddy, we give them a lot of attention, and yeah, that in-office way of working was just quite nice to onboard new people. However, now we have a quite major new establishment and a way of onboarding. So after the quarantine period, we give them full flexibility to work from home. Usually, of course, a new employee also wants to see the new working environment and the people working there. So we give them also the opportunity to do so. It's not mandatory, but it's optional. So another thing which was really important in onboarding, but also from HR perspective to share with the employee, was to mention that the typical requirement of the probation period was a little bit relaxed. And my first important message to future leaders and existing leaders is to make sure that you emphasize the importance of the relaxation of the probation period. What I noticed is when this thing is communicated, we notice a certain type of relaxation of the employee, which is very important when you start in a new company. For example, you come from Iran, you relocate to the Netherlands, and you're fully alone. So it's very important to make sure that the employee, when he's first started, to make them feel relaxed. So what are the specific success factors with a new starter? So first of all, relax the probation period, take it a bit easy on them, and give them specific time, extra time to get on the required performance level. So what we do is we get the new starters motivated and engaged with exciting projects they can work on individually or in small teams with buddies, of course, fully virtual. Now in HR, we call this work ownership. In our high performance organization, we have noticed there's a strong link between employees who have, on the one hand, ownership of work, on the other hand, having a culture of accountability and interdependency of teams, which basically means, okay, if person A did not finish his job, then person B cannot continue. And in our, we build algorithms and we build codes. So you can imagine if person A did not finish his code, then person B cannot do the code review. So it's, there's a high interdependency and culture of accountability and interdependency of teams. Next to that, NavInfo really has a high trust workplace. And this trust value is also critically embedded into our culture and the values of our organization. Especially trust that is gained in the previous years really proves valuable in this new way of working. What I also noticed is that if we give people the trust and if we emphasize our leaders to really mention, okay, tell the new employee and also the existing employees that you really trust them, we noticed also that the urge for people to prove that they are at work, it basically disappears. Also counts for myself. I think that everybody, when we started with a new way of working or the current way of working, that you really had the feeling like, okay, I have to show that I'm at work and I have to show my output. However, we noticed that, you know, if we let go of that urge to prove that you're at work, there's also, again, a type of relaxation for the employee, and as a consequence, the performance increases. Now, lastly, this is a really big success factor. So nothing really changed in the way how we monitor output, but mainly the way we communicate with others is changed when asking, for example, what the status is of work. So this is basically the way we onboard, and these are the success factors that I've noticed based on the interviews with our employees and our department managers and team leads to see, okay, what were the critical success factors in not only onboarding, but also the general health and happiness of our existing pool of employees. Now, how do we see the future? I think that our international view on this is that we will go towards a more hybrid way of working, basically to have the best of both worlds. When asking what do you miss most, I hear that the employees miss the coffee talks in the morning most, you know, that socializing aspect, but also it's a moment to know what's going on in the organization, and that keeps you engaged, it keeps you motivated, but also makes you want to go to office to have that coffee meeting. So yeah, we will go towards a more hybrid way of working to have the best of both known worlds. We also noticed that, especially when it comes to reasonably defined tasks and deadlines, that those tasks can be really well done in isolation. However, the most creative, spontaneous things, those quickly fade away in isolation, and it's not good for the long term. So in-office meetings would be wise for creative meetings and idea generation. One of the things is these coffee meetings is an ideal moment to have such a creative meeting. So basically my message to future leaders and the existing leaders of today is that they should focus more on their soft skills, mainly focusing on the happiness and involvement in the career of the employee. And we noticed that the general health and happiness really increases when a manager is involved in the career path, in the happiness and involvement and support in their professional career, as well as their current health. So what we try to do at Navinfo, but also mainly what our managers try to do, is providing a stable and collaborative environment which increases when taking extra care on the matters I just mentioned. So basically, what did we learn? What did I learn, but also what did Navinfo learn from this whole pandemic and the way we handled onboarding, is that soft skills are actually the hard message. So health, happiness, trust, and motivation is a huge factor in performance. And we can really see that a manager can make a difference by involvement. So lastly, how is HR then seen by the managers? HR is seen by some managers as the backbone of the organization. So managers see the value and stability HR has created, not only by promoting trust and work ownership and clear and timely communication, which led to stability in the new way of working, but also emphasizing, at least HR should emphasize, the way we reconsider people's performance and making sure that senior management is supportive in this. They should, HR has the ability to make a manager understand that the soft side of the work is very much more important than the actual output of the work. And that is my main message for future leaders, is that soft skills is the hard managers, and focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bart. Thank you very much for sharing this such valuable information, because I think this is, I know also that you have discussed while preparing for this webinar with quite some colleagues to also hear what they see, what they have noticed. So thank you so much for sharing this experience with us, because this is so hands-on that I'm sure that there's a lot of people in the audience that can use this immediately. So before I give the floor to Jorn, I'm going to launch the last poll. And I'm going to read it again for the ones who cannot see it. With remote work, the leadership should change style and focus on the well-being of employees. That's the... Almost all answered. I'm going to wait for 3 seconds for those who have not answered yet. And then I'm going to end the polling and I'm going to share the result with you. I think Jorn will be pleased with the result, because 55% said yes, fundamentally, because remote work is the new normal and speeds up the need for servant leadership approach. And 36% said yes, the way we lead is slightly different when people work from home. I think this is a great base for Jorn to start. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to give the floor to you, Jorn.
Lovely, great, thanks for that. I'm going to share my screen. I hope you can all see that.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So let me run you in the last 10-15 minutes through the slides that I prepared. You know, this is getting back to Nelly, Casper, and Bart very much. But I started to take this picture that I made a joke with, you know, some 5 or maybe 10 years ago. You know, when we saw all the millennials come on board and to the offices, and then we had sort of this joke between elderly people and younger people, when the elderly people were sort of, you know, working hard on Monday after a relaxed weekend and sort of being flat out tired on Fridays, whereas the millennials were eager to go to and work, but you know, had to party also during the weekends because they wanted everything out of life, and they had this promise that they can be everything they wanted to be. And so they were looking forward to the weekend again on Friday and being very much cheered up. And that means that we only could understand each other on Wednesdays when we're all a little bit shaky, but the one group was going up and the other one were going down. It was a fun joke. But where are we today now with COVID and lockdown? And the interesting thing that I'm observing is we have quite a young group of talented people on board. Actually, I can see them being very much tired and stressed on Fridays and looking forward to the weekend to just catch their breath. So it sort of switches now. The stress is enormous, the expectations are high, they expect a lot from and of themselves. And so that was interesting for me to say and to understand, you know, what is that, what's going on? On top of that, you know, working from home was sort of a trend that was going out there, you know, 5-10 years ago. And then there was still this hunger to control. So there was also an expectation behind that. And then this monitoring and how to manage everybody, even when we're in a remote place. And also here, you know, where are we today with this? And because we're all working from home now, so has this increased or not? And what does that mean for trust? And trust is something Bart already talked about previously. So interesting questions and how to deal with that. Now there is a research done just recently about before and after lockdown on the hours, average hours a day that we're working. And so from the 8 or 9 hours that we spent on behind our screen during lockdown and maybe to the point that we are today, the amount of hours spent is increasingly higher. So with 1 or 2 hours and sometimes even 3, we sometimes make 10-hour working days. So people are feeling they are need to work hard. They need to be behind the screen all the time. The expectation is high, but they're also strict for themselves. You know, I can do better. I can do better, but I also need to prove myself. So what does it say in where we are today? And I think, you know, performance management was pretty hip and still is. But maybe we should consider that into limitation management. Maybe we should go out there to our workforce and say, look, aren't you working too hard? Do you build in your breaks? We cannot see you in the office now. We do not actually see if you're tired or not. But you know, how are you doing? So this comes to this care factor, and people are actually working very hard, and I can see them sometimes tumbling over and then almost going into burnout, and that's not where we want it to be. So it's sort of that remote work is sort of also blurring some of the boundaries, despite the fact that it can be very attractive, as Bart pointed out, and Casper before that, is saying this is attractive to work from home and to work remote. But there's dangers to that. And we're facing this collectively. And I know there's a lot of managers out there, also in this group. But this report actually says that burnout is worldwide an increasing challenge for all of our employees. So this is the top of the challenges, but it's also looking at that they don't grow, they don't develop enough, and it's still almost 50% of the employees are saying this. So I think when you're in the office and you meet each other regularly, frequently, you can still do much more easy feedback and how's it going and what went well, but how can you improve, etc. Now, also those talks are just, you know, more limited, or you need to just reach out to do that, which is not their natural state. You know, this happens at the coffee corner. Recognition, you know, when we're in the office and you see somebody, you know, I loved what you did there, or that was great piece of work, you know. Now you need to actually go out there, phone somebody and tell them, or maybe send a mail, which is maybe partly the effect. But do we do this at all? And then leadership, no faith in leadership. And I keep seeing this back. You know, could be the black box. It could be not transparent. Where are we going? Now I can't even see them anymore. You know, so the whole leadership thing is going to be more of a black box, etc. So interesting challenges during this pandemic period for employees, but especially for us managers and leaders, and how to deal and cope with that. Then here's a picture I've shown in other webinars before, that working from home may be attractive, it may be flexible, but there's also stressors. And it's not only the physical stress and working long hours and sitting behind your desk in one position for 10 hours, which is not very healthy, but it could also have emotional stressors or mental stressors, and even spiritual, because even spiritual is sort of gradually being openly talked about, what that means, and a sense of belonging, etc. So social isolation obviously is a stressor. I'm not seeing my colleagues, I'm not seeing my manager or leaders. So who am I? Where am I? How does everything relate to each other? How do we actually think? You know, what's the thing that keeps me working for this company? There's a lot of distractions that that Nelly talked about earlier. The cat walking around and the child, whatever you have. That structure, how to structure yourself, to set you up properly. So there's nobody that's saying now, are you joining us for lunch? And I got that question normally. Jorn, are you joining for lunch? Well, now I have to tell myself I have to stop working and go for a lunch break. And then, what is this for work-life balance? And obviously, in the previous slide, that was a disturbing factor. Because the weekend sometimes we keep working to deliver there, or I haven't got anything else to do, can't see my family or friends, so better do a bit of work. And there's other stressors going out. So stress is number one cause for people in burnout or diseases, if you will. Stress is a very, very important thing to see how we can reduce that. And obviously, during COVID, there is a chance that it's increasing rather than decreasing. Now, when you're a manager or leader, you hope that people will follow you because you want to offer them something. And there's this basic needs that people would want to follow you for. The one is most important thing is the trust factor. And when the trust is not there, and going back to Bart, we need to provide them trust and some stability, but also compassion. I want to follow my leader because he's actually, or he or she's caring, or she's friendly. And with trust, I think, yes, I confide in you. When you say something, I take it seriously. You respect me, so I respect my leader. But then stability is another factor, and hope, two other factors that are now in this time of COVID and ongoing change more difficult. We can't see the future. Nelly said, it's okay to say you don't know. It's another thing to say, we're all on our own and see how you do it. You can also say, I can't see the future where this is going, but we're in this together, and yes, we support each other, and we're one group, so let's take this together. And what is your view? Maybe we can ask a question around, what does the employee see in this case? Because that could be even a more interesting thing. So it becomes more egalitarian in understanding what the future is all about. And then hope, maybe I don't know where this is going, but at least this is a trend that I'm seeing, or at least we can organize ourselves that way, which gives a bit of that hope or stability or points of view that you can cling to. And all of these four factors are needed, especially in a remote world, to make sure that you still confide in your manager and your leader going forward. But there are also a lot of soft things, as Bart mentioned. There's an increasing need also for more autonomy and development. Now, when I see these millennials come in, they want to develop as fast as they can. They always told me, I need fast-paced track. I need to develop fast. I need to be impactful. So development is important for them, and then this is where training comes in, but also a bit of autonomy. And I would like to steer my own career development, but I still need my managers and mentors and coaches to do that for me. Now, in a remote world, you don't have that face-to-face contact. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's more difficult. There's challenges behind that. So it's also the case that in this remote world, the hunger for independence grows. Of course, there's more freedom around that as well. You're free to organize your own work in a way, and you almost have to do that. But I still want to be inspired, and the sources of inspiration, it can be on the internet, or can be seeing this YouTube movie or TED Talk. But it needs to add to my knowledge, my inspiration, my development, and then a higher shape of identity. I am more free, I'm more autonomous, so then can I have the space to express myself more freely. And can I be more autonomous in my own decision making? Because I think for my job, I would know better than you, manager or leader, or even further down or up, if you like, in the chain. And we have also seen that people tend to stay in a company if they are really feel that they are developed. So almost 90% says that when we have that my company invested in my development, whether that's training, it's learning on the job, or it's an external training, personal development, I tend to stay. So that's important. They need that. And in the remote world, again, it's more difficult, but we can't let that go. So these are topics that also increase in a remote world and yet are very difficult to deal with. Which brought me to this one that I thought was interesting, because there's, of course, 3 types of intelligence. We've got our IQ, emotional intelligence, EQ has been coming up in the last years. So emotionals, what you feel, it's the social capital. But today, the question sort of starts to really come, who am I really? And what am I contributing to? And does that make sense? I want to belong. I want to give back to society. I need to bring the best of my ability and my full talent so that I can contribute to the world in a meaningful way. Now, that's a high spiritual intelligence that's coming up. And we managers, leaders are not really educated to deal with that. We were taught how to perform, how to make sure that people are on projects and that they follow the training paths and the curriculum that was out there for a 5-year plan, etc. And never been, what about you? And how can we sort of find the job around you or do job crafting? That's all coming up now. And this is what people want to feel. They want to feel they belong. They want to feel they make an impact to the world and to mature themselves. And also when they feel that they're on that right track, that gives them energy. So again, challenges for leaders and managers to go on this spiritual intelligence path and see where that leads them. Actually, this is a little bit elaborating on the previous slide, where when the will is strong and you have your purpose, and also our previous speakers talked about purpose, that's where the motivation comes from. So I'm motivated to do my job. I'm motivated to work with this company because it fulfills a purpose that I can rely with, that I can identify with. And when we've got all this in place, the performance goes up. Again, the challenge is not to make people work 10 hours or more, because you will end up in a burnout, even though you would love your job. But still, it starts with that. When people feel connected and motivated, you like to perform better, and you can do that your own way. Now, the only thing we need is, take it step by step and don't fall in a burnout. And that's what we need to do. So what does it mean for management? And I think it's a time now, and I used to say this already quite a while ago, but we've lived in a time that classic management sort of is becoming a bit outdated here. Being the boss had its best time. We're becoming more egalitarian anyway. That's what working from home does to us in a way. It's time to start inspiring our people. Rather than taking credit, you give people credit and congratulate them for the performance they have done, because they need to feel that they are appreciated, that they are seen. So rather than reactive, is everything going right, yes or no, and I'll just manage something when it's not right. You now need to go out there and ask. You need to make that call to your employees and say, how are you doing? This is a proactive attitude. You cannot wait too long and see when the shit hits the fan. You need to go out there and prevent that it's happening. And rather than making the rules, maybe you should break the rules. We are in a new world. It's remote. It's looking at different ways of organizing, ways of working. The culture changes. So let's make new sets of engagements and rules. And a culture that works for us, even if it's remote here to stay, or hybrid office spaces with partly remote, partly in the office could take place. We're in a world where we're not sure what's out there next. Pandemic is killing some business models. We now need to start taking risks because we just know that not doing or changing or innovating, maybe you're dead. It's not sustainable. Imagine you're in oil business or aviation. You need to take risks to reinvent yourself, and you need the right brain, the creativity part of your brain, to help do that. Now, that only goes with trust. Again, here, pointing out to their previous speakers that talked about trust. And you need to appeal to the heart. So yes, IQ, but now it's also the EQ and the SQ to the heart, and become passionate about new things, inventing new things, being creative, making mistakes and learning from them. And then the leader are probably more charismatic and not authoritative. Authoritative had its best time, I think, and telling people what to do. And now it's more, and how can we do this together? So you're setting directions rather than planning details and shaping culture. Some of the things that I think, let's rethink classic management and become more leaders than bosses. Now, bringing that into practice in a remote world, it's never easy, but we can learn as well from being a manager or being a leader. Actually do your daily check-ins, whether that's an individual or team sessions. But we got to over-communicate. People are hungry for information. They need to understand who does what. We can't ask it in the office anymore, so we need to know. So set the rules of the engagements and then live by them yourself as a manager, and maybe you not only set them, but you just discuss them in your team. How should we work together in this phase? And managing expectations, but maybe you should also say, I don't expect you to perform every time to the max. You need to start maximizing working hours, because you can see mails coming in at 2 o'clock at night, and then you have to ask yourself whether that's healthy or not. And of course, a very obvious one is focusing on outcomes and not activities. So the end result counts, and in the meantime, how are you doing, and do you need my help in helping you on the outcome that we talked about? That purpose becoming increasingly more purpose, sense of belonging. I want to work here because it adds to a purpose. Let it be a shared purpose, by all means. Spend time on that, quality time. If there's any resources that you can bring them or mentor them, that's very helpful. I talked about home office innovation before. Now the home office is the new office. So do you have the right screens and chairs to sit in, and headsets, what have you? Because you can invest in that. Yeah, people are not traveling, so there's less cost. You can close down the office, there's less cost. So invest in the home office, bring resources to them, offer it. Remove any obstacles, goes without saying, and encourage this social interaction. Why don't you have a session together which is just about how are you doing, any jokes to be told, how about your family and your grandmother? Any small talk is helping people to feel that sense of belonging. Be flexible, show that empathy, and do more mentoring and less managing. So bring that into practice. Start with that today, because people really feel the need in how am I doing? I need mentoring. I need people to give me feedback and to help me understand whether I'm on the good path without falling into a burnout. So again, more managing is not good, but more leading is better, and even on an individual level. That's the new normal where we're going. So frequent personal attention is good, even if it is remote, or especially in the remote world. Sincere interest. There's another slide next to it that I talked a little bit more about. but ask the question, how are you really doing? So give them attention, be mindful, be understanding. So I think most time as a manager and leader is more on that softer side. Soft is the new hard, as Bart mentioned. Your people need to be seen, they need to feel understood. This is the feel again, this is the EQ, and they need to sense they belong. There's the SQ again for you. And they need to be getting appreciation and guidance. How am I doing? Yeah. So the leadership is becoming more interesting, more important in this world, in this remote world, than the management rules of engagement that we had in the period that's behind us. Just one more slide on quality calls. Empathy is very key. And I've been asking everybody in the company that I work for to make quality calls, pure quality calls, that is. I've asked all of them to say, why don't you block 1 or 2 hours a week in each of your agendas to make the pure quality call. What I mean with that is you need to go out there and ask them how they're doing. Ask them, are you doing? And if ask them with the amount of working hours, if they're physically fit, if they're mentally fit, what's bothering them, and let them feel that you are genuinely interested. And when they say, sure, I'm fine, and let's move on, I made this joke, like, I'm fine. Well, what's behind that? Fine could mean frustrated, irritated, neurotic, and emotional, because you were taught not to say when it's not fine or when you're not okay. So just look beyond the answer, I'm fine, I'm okay, let's talk work. No, or well, if you're truly fine, what, can you explain me what that means? Are you seeing your family? Do you go to the gym? Do you have a workout? If that's really true, that's good. But ask them and show the interest, because maybe when you're asking and they are hesitant to answer because, well, that's the politeness and they want me to go into the project mode again. No, you're now here to really ask them how they are. And the trick there is, in the same quality call, as I said, don't mix it up with any kind of business or performance. So I think you should be closing the call with that conversation, how you're doing, because only then they have the feeling, wow, this call was really about the interest in me, in my personal well-being, and that's good. So I would recommend people to close the call also with, I'm happy that you're okay, or offer them any help when they're not okay, guidance, help, distraction, office supplies, whatever they need. And that quality call shows 100% empathy. And that's when people feel seen, recognized, and feel like, okay, I can trust my leaders now. And in Lencioni's pyramid that I showed before, trust is the very foundation for which you can build belonging and accountability in the end. So that foundation needs to come from us. It needs to come from the leadership, right? So this is what I've said, being a sort of a metaphor for the financial world. Go for the AAA status. And with AAA in this terms, I would mean alertness, active, and attention. And I think as leaders, you and I should become very alert on signals for our individuals' well-being. How can we now understand when it's not going well? We need to just go very proactive and ask them, or have others whisper in your ears. So you and I are very active in approaching our workforce and ask how they're doing, and listen and see what we can do to help out. And you and I are providing attention to our people, because they need to feel they belong. They need to feel being taken seriously as a person, as an individual with their own creativity and unique set of skills, because that recognition and attention makes them go. It's nurturing, it is feeding them, it provides energy, and that's when it go. And when you want to make that even a AAA+++ status in this financial world, now we can say you can add your leadership with the +++ on being attractive leader, a very abundant leader, and maybe even awesome. Then you got it made. And I think that's where we're going to in this new world. You know, finance is not ruling the world anymore. It is the AAA stage on making talent really seen, recognized, feeding that and nurturing that. And in a remote world, there's no other way in sort of replacing the physical contact with a remote contact that shows this AAA status. So to finalize here, actively reach out and make sure people belong. You know, you help people rather than sort of being on the mountain and pointing at yourself. You know, be visible in a remote world. Be visible. Use your conscious leadership. Lead more and manage less, and go for you know, that healthy work-life balance. And in this process, you need to take care of one thing as a leader, and you need to remain resilient yourself. Once you do not have energy yourself, you cannot give it to your people. So you need to recharge yourself and put on the oxygen mask when you need it before you can give it to others that are so much looking up to you. So moving away from the pseudo leader that gives others of a feeling that you are great. No, the authentic leader leaves you with a feeling that of your greatness, so of the greatness of the employee. So your leadership endeavor in this time and age matters so much during these very unconventional times. I wanted to end up with that. I know behind that there's a lot of tooling also prepared, but let's not go into there. I just, for the sake of time, want to end up and go back to Sylvie and the rest of the speakers to answer your questions in a panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jorn. And indeed, we have a few questions. Maybe the panels can unmute themselves as well. The first question is from Thibaut for Nelly. When you spoke about authenticity,
Yes.
the question is, do you believe that people are by default not very authentic at work? And if so, why would that be?
I think the good question, first of all. I think it's hard to talk for everyone, of course, but I do think that a lot of us, yes, we definitely have one or perhaps several filters when we are in the workplace as opposed to when we are at home or in our personal environment. And then, sorry, what was the second part of the question?
Why would it be, if that's the case, why would that be?
Well, I think that very much depends on the culture of the organization you're in. I think if you're in an organization with a very high performance culture, it's probably more likely that everybody pretends to always be on top of their game and that everything goes well. And I think if the organizational culture is different and allowing for people to say, hey, I'm having a bad day, so that other people can take that into account, then it will different. I had a cool example coming from Porsche, obviously the German car manufacturer. Apparently they have a policy or something in their company that has to do with people having bad days. And so, yeah, if people have a bad day, then they literally tell their colleagues that, people, they take it a little bit easier on those colleagues. So I think it very much depends on the organizational culture you're in, and it probably also depends on the country you're in. I think that in some countries it's probably easier to be completely authentic than it is in other countries. And one last thing that I want to say is that being authentic does not mean to throw overboard all the rules of common decency and respect and just being polite towards other people. It is just about you being able to be yourself. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, I think so. I cannot answer for Thibaut. Thibaut, if you have an additional question, don't hesitate to unmute yourself as well if you would like to add something.
I'm good, Sylvie. Thank you very much. Yes, it answers the question. And I can add that I find this incredible, and it's not a rebuttal of what you said, Nelly. I find this incredible because I agree with it, that nowadays a high performance culture gets associated with a place where you can't be yourself. I tend to agree with this, but I strongly disagree that this turns out to be a high performance. That's the one thing that I wanted to add. Thank you, Nelly.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Thibaut. There is another question for Jorn. First time I hear about the spiritual intelligence. Nice compliments to the IQ and the EQ. Would you have some books or references for us? How does this relate to the topic of the Maslow pyramid is also the question.
Yeah. So good question. I think there's some books. I think Breathe is an interesting book. I think James Nestor wrote that. There's a book, Spiritual Intelligence. It's actually named by Dana Zohar. I, for one, was very inspired by Joseph Jaworski. That is not, going deeply into spiritual intelligence, but he talks about stage 4 leadership, and that stage 4 leadership basically has everything to do with being a very good leader, but then being virtually connected with almost the spiritual side, where your sense of direction is also virtually aligned with a higher source. And he talked about that as a leadership that we really need in today's time. And then with regards to Maslow, Maslow, of course, you can only start talking about spiritual leadership when the foundations is in place. And I think, when as long as we have a job and we are fed and we are, we have the basics in place, then you start to think about higher purposes to fulfill and to contribute to. And that then goes to almost the spiritual levels in belonging and giving back to society and caring. And those are, in the Maslow periods, the highest reachable. And this is where we're going now. So we're all still fairly well off in this Western world. And now we want to take care of the world, and we need to be led and contribute. And this is what this new generation wants. They want to contribute to society. And when I see people in a leadership training and present themselves, 90% of these people say, I need to give back to society. I need to make sure that the energy transition is going. So that is a high need, and we need to help them fulfill that mission.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thanks. Also in the chat, Thibaut also added another suggestion for a book. You answered a question still. Casper, do you want to say something about it yourself?
Yeah, I want to add to that a little bit when it comes to values and people making choices to join a certain company. I have that with certain candidates as well. They say, I want to join a company that's for the public good, right? I don't want to join a company that's politically incorrect. And I've struggled with that question a little bit. What is that value behind it? And I work on it a little bit as well to open the possibilities with candidates to look at jobs that, for example, have to do with government and public jobs, right? Because sometimes behind it is a more public cause. It could be something concrete like medical. I want to make the world a better place when it comes to medical solutions, but it can also be a public cause. And I tend more and more to also guide candidates in roles that have to do with government and public situations. So this whole value recruitment, yes, it comes up. People are not very strong at naming it, what that value is, right? They don't have good words around it, not many of them at least. So some help is needed there.
Yeah, true. Thank you, Casper. I think we have time for one last question. If anyone would like to unmute him or herself, that's fine as well, to address directly and ask your question to one of the panel members. If there are no more questions, I'm going to wrap up. First of all, of course, by thanking our speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and knowledge. I think it was a more than hands-on webinar where people can directly start working on and change their way of leadership, change their way of onboarding or working on the well-being of their staff. So thank you so much, Jorn, Nelly, Casper, and Bart. And if one of you has any questions to one of the speakers, do not hesitate to contact either them directly or me, and I will pass through your contact details if you need any more information. Thank you so much, audience, for participating, for asking your questions, for sharing your ideas with us. And I wish you a very good day, and I hope to see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvie.
Bye.
Thank you very much.